People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
Hey folks, welcome to a very special episode of The Projection Booth. I'm your host Mike White, and I am joined by Mark Jason Murray and Leslie Winston, all about the new film Wildheart. Actually, it's not really a new film, it's a new collection of films. It is a series of loops that have been put together as a new Blu-ray. We talked with Mr. Murray a few years ago about his book on Dolomite. We didn't really talk too much about Ultra Flesh Archives, which is tough to say for me, but very enjoyable. Mr. Murray is doing a great job of archiving and bringing to light a whole lot of stuff that really has been pretty much relegated to the dustbin of history. Had a great time talking with him and Ms. Winston. Definitely check out ultraflesharchives.com. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the interview. What is your relationship with the Ultra Flesh Archives?
I am Ultra Flesh Archives.
He is the Ultra Flesh Archives. And how do you decide what to put out?
Well, I'm trying to do stuff that's different from what's been released already, in the loop category. A lot of this stuff that's come out has just been random, seemed like random selections of loops. There's nothing that's really like curating something special. I just decided to make some stuff that's more specific, specific to the stars, not necessarily specific to theme, but the releases that I'm doing, trying to make them much more classy, and also, what's the term I'm looking for here? A little more thorough, with a lot more attention paid to the material. If we could just kind of we'll just go back to the beginning. This kind of all started gestating about a decade ago. Mostly it's my wife's fault. I'm going to blame her. We had started buying up magazine collections and such. This all stemmed from her decorating our bathroom with pictures from adult magazines, and so we kind of had this quote-unquote porno bathroom. So I started going on Craigslist and buying people's magazine collections, people that had passed away. There's a lot of interesting stories just about meeting people, and some, a wife selling us her husband's prized, adult magazine collection and being very happy that we weren't a reseller and that we were going to, preserve and collect these things. And I always had a little bit of an interest in loops, and the material that I had seen coming out just the quality wasn't really there. I wasn't very satisfied with the way that it looked. And so I got this generalized idea that that's how they look. They look like garbage. They look like, you can barely tell what's going on. They're so dark that it's just almost unwatchable. And there were some releases that have come out. I'm not here to disparage anybody. It just, I'm trying to do my own thing. And I started to collect the loops, and I found a collector, and he had a lot of duplicates and things, and I started buying from him. And then as I started watching them, I'm projecting them and realizing that they don't look that bad and they could look better. So as I was wrapping up my work on the Rudy Ray Moore Dolomite book and all the things that were going along with that, this was just kind of percolating in the background as what's going to be the next project that I'm going to work on. So I had to complete all that when there was still a lot remaining with the Dolomite as my name coming out and then my book coming out and all that. So I started to realize that they could look better. And I went through pretty much every transfer process from the cheapest. And then I realized that what I was seeing out there was from people using the cheapest possible equipment, low resolution, and just no attempt to make any kind of improvement to the visual quality. So eventually I just said, screw it. And I bought my own transfer equipment, not the store-bought garbage that people had been using. And pretty much spent about 2 years just playing around, just transferring movies, messing around, trying to figure out how to restore them. what software to use, what's affordable. I'm not Criterion, so I can't afford a piece of transfer equipment that costs more than my house. That's the truth, and that's why it's hard to do this. And I don't think people necessarily realize what is involved in film restoration. You need computers, you need data storage, you need physical storage, and there's a lot of stuff that goes along with it. But I just kept tinkering and working on how to transfer what gives me a better transfer, working in color correction. And when I got to a point where I was, satisfied and thought that what I was doing was valid and looked good, then I just, took it from there, and with the desire to do some physical releases. We're both fans of physical media. That's where it's at. When I get involved in something and I take a liking or an interest, it's 10,000%. So it was all in. And just through my minor involvement in the adult spectrum, of classic adult films, and just becoming friends with people who were in that era, like Leslie and other people, it just kind of, in a way, made it easy to do a project like this, because Leslie and I were, already acquainted with each other, and she was interested in that, and was in a period in her life where she was ready to acknowledge and celebrate that period of her life. In a way, it was really easy to do this, because it's just how my personal inertia works, and in terms of how I function. I have an energy that has to be focused on something, and this is where that energy goes. Pretty much determined that this is what I'm doing until I die.
So my dad had a few Swedish erotica loops, but for the folks that are listening at home, can you talk a little bit about loops and the loop phenomenon?
Loops is kind of a loose term for short 8mm or Super 8 films. It could also refer to 16mm. The term loop originates from 42nd Street in the 60s and 70s. I don't remember exactly when the first guy decided to, rig his machine. But what it meant was you would go to a booth and you would put your quarter or nickel or whatever it was in there, and you would see a certain amount of time movie. Hopefully you got to see a good part, or you had to put in another quarter and wait, and see what was going on. But they would rig the machine up so that it would play continuously in a constant loop. So they didn't have to go into the equipment, rewind the film, or put another film in there. It just was constantly playing on a loop. So it's become a general term. Technically, it doesn't apply to the current scenario. We're not playing them in booths, peep show booths and things like that. But it's an understood term for 8mm and Super 8mm films. And it's actually amazing to me how many of those were made, for the home market. Super 8 and 8mm films, go back to 8mm goes back to like the 20s or 30s. Super 8, I think, was, I'm going just loosely off of memory here, was, I think, in the mid 60s or early 60s. So, part of what I'm doing here, I think, is I always am interested in a niche of a niche of a niche. One of my challenges is to, one, show that these can look good. We're not talking 70mm, one battle after another. These are shot as cheaply and quickly as possible and manufactured as cheaply and quickly as possible. You're not going to get the type of resolution from an 8mm film, which actually the film frame is much less than 8mm. It's just the width of the film strip itself. But to show that you can get better quality, I've heard people say that there's nothing that you can do with these, and I think I've already proven that you can do some dramatic increase to the quality of them, whether it be just by cleaning up the damage, color correcting, and things of that nature. So partly proving or trying to convince people that these can look better, and also showing them and hoping that they'll understand. And what I believe truly is that they have value in the history of erotica.
Ms. Winston, I'm sure you've been asked this 1,000 times before, so forgive me for asking 1,001. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got into the adult industry?
Let's see. I wanted to make some money and I was mad at my father. That goes. Just a bunch of stuff. My mother had died and I was planning on going up to San Francisco to go to college. But anyhow, I wanted to stop off and make some money because my father had remarried and all of this kind of stuff. So I answered an ad in the Orange County Register for figure models. And so I went and I thought, oh, I'll make some money and then I'll be on my way up north. And so 10 years later, I was still there, still modeling and making movies. And that is how I got into the adult industry.
And what kind of movies were you making? Were you primarily making features, or how did these loops, as we call them, how did they come into play?
Okay, well, I did print work for about a year, just like magazines and magazine covers. And then my agent, Jim South, asked if I wanted to do a movie. And in those days, there was a lot of loops, like they didn't have the videos. And so I started doing loops, and I did do one feature film called Bad Girls, and that was a major feature film. But mostly I did a lot of loops, a lot of these, silent loops that Ultraflush Archives is talking about, Mark's talking about.
How were the shoots? Were they pretty quick, or how would you prepare for those?
Well, usually I wouldn't eat for a couple of days because I wanted to be thin. They would take, half a day, maybe a whole day sometimes, because they would take lots of footage and then you would have to do stills with it. So like if they were promoting it to put, the picture on the cover or whatever. So they definitely got their money's worth out of you.
They maximized every opportunity. A lot of these would have a co-magazine that would go with it or something like that. So they were doing everything that they could to get, every penny out of what the material was.
Did you have, for lack of a better term, like a specialty or a certain thing that you were known for?
I did later on. I became very well known for my milk shoots because there was only like one other woman, Angel Milkmaid Cash. She also did milk. So there wasn't a lot of actresses or models that did milk shoots. So I did become somewhat famous after I had my first daughter and was doing milk shoots. So I did become famous for that because I did do a lot of milk and fetishes, like foot fetish or, tickling or enemas and that kind of stuff. I did do a lot of that as well.
So by milk shoots, you were lactating at the time?
Yes, correct. Yes. Sorry if I wasn't clear about that.
No, I figured I understood. I just want to make sure that folks understand what's going on. So no, that's great.
They'll do them and they're not really lactating. And you can always tell because the stream of milk is, just a straight stream of milk. That's not how milk, comes out. It comes out in, like a spray of 5 to 10, you know what I mean? So it's, yeah. So I definitely was lactating.
Wait, you mean some of those other ones are phony? Oh, man.
So funny.
How often would you do these?
I did quite a few. I don't know. I was probably doing a few, a handful a month probably when I was lactating.
I hate to be indelicate, but did the loops pay pretty well?
At the time for what they were, I think they did. It was pretty good money. At the time, I wouldn't say it would be good money now, but it was pretty good money then.
How would people interact with these? Would they buy them in stores? Would they order them via magazines? What was the way of distributing loops?
I think it was both, wasn't it, Mark? I'm pretty sure it was. They would order them in a magazine or they could buy them in stores.
Yeah, it also depended on the companies. There were some companies, you had mentioned Swedish Erotica earlier, that was, a major producer of this type of material. So those are the things that you would find in the stores, other things like limited edition and some of the larger companies. But there's also thousands and thousands of smaller companies that were producing these on a much smaller scale that were primarily selling them through ads in the backs of magazines. So you wouldn't necessarily have like a I'm imagining, because I wasn't buying loops in a porno shop when I was 6 years old. You would see them, even some of them would say, suggested retail price $75. I mean, that's like $400 or $500 in 1978, conversions. I really doubt that they were charging that amount. I think it was just so that the stores could likely, say 50% off, and now it looked like it was a deal. Because who in their right mind at that time has really got $500 to spend on 8 minutes worth of porn? But it is actually, I think I mentioned earlier, just amazing about how much material is out there. And even with, I'm about 7,500 titles deep in my collection of 8 and Super 8 films. I'm probably a total of somewhere around 11,000 loops in total, because I have a couple thousand duplicates that I'm always, if I'm doing a project, I may have 3 or 4 copies of the same item that I'm reviewing to try to get the best quality, or even sometimes, like I did on Leslie's release, combine the intro of a 8mm film with the Super 8 version, because the Super 8 is projected slightly faster than 8mm. So you would get a little bit more material on an 8mm film, because there's time for them to have whatever little intro leads to the action. And then the Super 8s would often just kind of cut straight to that. You get a little bit more runtime from an 8mm, but you get better quality from a Super 8, because the frame size is a lot larger.
Right. Yeah. The sprockets are only on one side for Super 8, correct?
Well, they're only on one side for both, but you get a sort of a rectangular sprockets on a 8mm, and they're placed in between each frame. And then a Super 8 is a square, so they use that extra space that they saved from going square, and it's in the center of the frame. So it's really easy to just open up the film and look and see what kind of if it's 8 or Super 8 if you're not aware. Usually the Super 8 has a larger hole in the middle of the reel than a 8mm does, but that's not always a absolute indicator that you have Super 8, because I've had hundreds of them that were put on 8mm that were put on Super 8 quote unquote reels. So, and also, like with the releases, like in Leslie's case, there's an info card that's included in there with an actual piece of 8mm or Super 8 film. Part of that is just because I thought it was a great idea just to include something like that to kind of celebrate the formats. The other is going back to what I said before about how to show people what you're up against. So if you're looking at it and saying, wow, this doesn't look like, the latest James Cameron movie, you can go look at that frame and try to hold it up to your eye and see just how small, of a piece of material that we're working with here. And I think that's why a lot of people just say there's nothing that you can do with these, because it is so small. But again, I'm fighting that battle.
I didn't realize they were that tiny until I opened the package and looked at the insert that you had put in, and I was just amazed by it, because I thought, my gosh, it's so tiny. It's pretty cool.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Wildheart, the Leslie Winston Collection. When it comes to what films were selected, were these all from your collection, or how did you decide this is what is going to go on this disc?
Yeah, everything comes from the archive that I'm building here and continue to build. Essentially, it's how many films do I have and what's usable. What's usable is often the challenge. Having a lot of films is the easy part. I think in total, Leslie, you've done something like 22, 23 loops off the top of my head. So we ended up including 16 total. There's one as a bonus loop that I ended up actually getting a better quality version later on. And so I just threw it on there last minute as I say throw it on, not that it was to discount it, but, I had the option to put it there to include a little bit more of Leslie in the release. And that's what I was saying about going through 3, 4, 5 different versions of the same item. You can get one, let's say you open one up and it's faded and totally red. So not a lot you can do there with, something you can do, but you're not going to have a lot of color definition when you're done working with it. You could have something that someone has some dirt in their projector. Now there's a line going through the entirety of the of the film on the right-hand side because they didn't keep their projector gate clean. You could open it up and realize, there's who knows how much footage is missing because there's no head or there's no tail on it. So those are often, in the case of Leslie, I bought one of her films 4 times, and the 4th time I finally got the right film inside. Part of it is a treasure hunt. You never know what you're going to come up with. And so basically what I was able to determine was the 16 best condition pieces of material loops that I could use, and that was what was included on there. Some of them were, for an example, there's a specific company that Leslie did 2 or 3 with that every frame seems to have this weird, how do I describe it? Like film over the top of it, this brownish film. And it's odd that it's there. It's not like in the entirety of the frame, but there's the majority of it has this weird something on it. There's been times I'll use the one that I mentioned that I used the intro from the 8mm and then the full version of 16 for Leslie. That was called Valley Girl. I've had, I think, 3 different versions of the Super 8 that were different. They were manufactured different. One had a longer opening. One had a shorter opening. It's odd to me that they're different, but if you try to think about it, like my guess is that potentially they did like a reissue of it and they wanted to cut their expenses even more, so they shortened it. And then they just started it at even a later point in this version of the Super 8 versus the earlier versions of the Super 8. I found films that start with the end of another, like they were cut incorrectly at the manufacturing facility. So that means somebody out there has a movie that doesn't even have the end of the film. I have seen some that showed the film playing forwards and backwards simultaneously on the same movie. So there was not a lot of quality control when they were manufacturing these. Again, you never know what you're opening up. I've opened up stuff that's had bugs in them, mold, cocoon casings, and because people could have these in their attic, they have them in their garage. They're often not necessarily cared for properly, and part of that is because people are trying to hide them. They're not having them openly available in their home. They had children or whatever, so they're hiding them up in the closet or in an attic or somewhere in the garage. You find Grandpa's old porn stash. There is a lot of challenges with that.
I should have asked this before, but how do you two know each other? How did you two meet?
Social media.
Yep, social media.
When did you come to Leslie and say, I want to do this project? Or was it vice versa?
I think it just kind of happened organically because when I started Ultra Flesh Archives kind of officially, I obviously didn't have any product to promote. So I kind of just started posting pictures of magazines from my collection and loops from the collection. One of the things that I kind of take pride in is that, these are the actual physical items here. Anybody can, snip a picture off of the internet somewhere and post it, but I have the true item. So call it ego, call it whatever you want, but I'm trying to show that these things exist and someone is maintaining these things. And I think it just kind of gradually of maybe someone had posted a picture of Leslie and I would post a picture of one of her loops. And then we just kind of got in contact with each other and it just sort of organically became what it is.
I'm so proud of this project and I'm just so grateful that you take pride in your porn. That's what he always says. I'm a big advocate of that as well. So I'm just really grateful. And it's a beautiful project. And one of the loops is my very first loop that I ever did is in this collection. And it's really nice. I'm really proud of it.
Well, I'm curious how it is for you to go back and see these things.
It was funny because I had forgotten when we were going over them and I was like, I just had to laugh at some of the things, but yeah, no, it was very nice. It was nice and brought back a lot of memories. And there's a commentary over the collection that you can listen to if you choose to. And so you can get a little insight into what you're seeing and what's going on. It's really good.
I mean, it sounds like, Mark, you had big challenges when it came to restoring these things. And I love that on your website, you can actually see some of the progress of the frames and seeing just how rough some of this was to start with.
Well, and that's why I included also a restoration featurette on there, so you could see the raw scan, the computer cleanup, and then the final version. So you see the difference in the damage correction and also the color correction. I explained this in the little info card, but of course you want the computer to do the most amount of work for you. But there's often times when I'll go through and manually correct other damages. It could be hundreds and hundreds of frames. You're talking anywhere from 8 to 10,000 frames on an 8mm film. So that's still a lot of ground to cover. And because the image is so small, you don't want to go overboard on your filters that you're using to, clean up and recognize the damage, because then you're also taking away some of the detail. You might lose a fingertip or a tip of another thing, if you know what I'm talking about. So it's, or even like something like, let's say someone's whipping somebody, you might lose that whip in the movement. Sometimes because of the limitations of the format, you lose it anyways. Like, it's not necessarily totally visible on the original version. It is difficult. So I do the best that I can, and my skills continue to improve. And it's not going to take 2 years for my next release to come out. I'm actually in the process of 9 releases at the moment. So there'll be more in terms of like these specific collections like I did with Leslie. And I think that, it's been nice because Leslie and I, believe, have become great friends. And so I want something like that to be recognized when we're working on a project together, when people listen to our commentary, that it's not just like, hey, I just met you yesterday and we're going to talk about this and make it dry. Hopefully there's some, I don't know if humanity is the right word in there, but we, and this is also a sensitive thing. I mean, I'm sitting there with someone, Leslie, watching her have sex with someone. So this is an intimate scenario, and I tried to come to it with some sensitivity. And I told Leslie, I'm kind of matter of fact about this, because all day long I'm sort of watching these things and restoring them and working with them. So Hustler magazine is no different from a People magazine in some ways in my house. So I have to kind of reel myself in and just, say, hey, if there's anything that makes you uncomfortable, let me know, and we won't discuss that. Would believe in that Leslie had a good time and was comfortable with it.
Yes, it was great.
It was great for me as a viewer, just because suddenly the person I'm seeing on screen has a voice. There is no dialogue to these. I like, Mark, that you have the projector sound going the whole time to kind of give you that experience as if you were watching this in your basement or whatever with that projector. But now to suddenly have Leslie have a voice and be able to tell us more about this, it was such a good feature to have on this.
No one's ever done that before, shown loops and had a commentary with them that I'm aware of. And especially, I can guarantee you, no one's ever done it with the person who's the star of the loops. So that's another thing that I wanted to do to set myself apart from others. Now, there's 3 other projects I'm working on right now that will be with Serena Sue Nero and Rhonda Joe Petty, and they will all be involved in those. Going forward, when I'm doing collections of a certain star, it's likely that there will not be any cooperation, or I don't know if cooperation is the right word, but these people have, either disappeared or passed away. So having them be involved is an impossibility, but we'll be doing other things to, I guess we could say, compensate for the lack of their involvement, to include some more features, and I want these to be fun to watch. I want them to have extra context, which is why I included like an old black and white kind of nudie cutie type movie. This is kind of the origin of where this all comes from. So, and I have, hundreds and hundreds of those in my collection as well. So I want to make these things available, utilizing the little flexi discs that came with the magazines. Leslie had done some, but unfortunately I wasn't able to locate any. So we included those here, but like I have some from Serena. So when we do the Serena collection, there'll be some of those there. So it's also archiving it, but making it available to everybody and making it a fun release that is just more than, an endless selection of thrown together material.
Yeah, I can't believe the packaging, that all the stuff that's inside the disc with the disc and then everything that's on the disc. I mean, this is such a deluxe package.
Very nice. Yeah. Very nice.
That's just my nature. I want it to look good. I want Leslie to be proud of it. I want to be proud of it. And like I said, straight up, take pride in your porn. Like, I try to generally avoid the vulgar descriptions that would come from the era. The names of the loop titles and stuff are what they are. But I'm not kind of outwardly celebrating that stuff. It doesn't bother me, but I'm trying to present things in a little bit more of a classy way than what they were presented before. And I know that was all just marketing. You're trying to market your product, and it's, you go to the adult bookstore in 1980 and you're looking at the back of the loot boxes, and you're trying to buy the filthiest thing that's there. So they're trying to tell you that this is the filthiest thing that you're ever going to see. But I think we don't need that anymore. So I don't need to present something with a title right out that's vulgar,
Thank you, Leslie, for still embracing your past. There are too many people that will just kind of distance themselves. So it was very refreshing to have you as such an active participant in this.
I love it. I mean, I don't think I'd change anything. It was a good part. I had a good time.
What was the difference for you between doing the loops and then doing features? Because I know you've been in quite a few features as well, including at least one of my favorite movies, Cabaret Sin.
It was a little different. I mean, because we had to talk. So we had speaking roles. So it was a little different. But as far as, for us, for me anyway, it didn't seem that much different because we're still, having sex on screen. So it was the same thing, except that we did have dialogue. So you couldn't say, "Oh, ouch, that hurts. Can you stop?" Or "Can you move that over?" or something like that. You'd have to wait for them to cut and then just say, "Hey, can you move your position?" or something. But otherwise, it kind of seems the same because when you're in front of the camera.
Did I read right? Did you win the AVN Hall of Fame last year?
Yes, I did. Finally was recognized in the video category. So that was really nice for me. And I really appreciated that.
Is there a good place for people to keep up with you and your work online?
I mean, I have a Facebook page and I have a Twitter. So I have that, and that would be great.
And then, Mark, I'm glad you mentioned that you're already got your next releases planned. Do you have any dates or anything in mind for those?
Not specifically yet. I'm still putting the material. I have all the materials and pretty much for those 9 releases that I loosely mentioned that I'm working on. All the initial material has been transferred and initially restored, I guess we could say. I still need to go through it and fine tooth comb it and do the color corrections. But I'm assembling all the materials that I need. I'll be meeting with Serena and Sue Nero and Rhonda Joe Petty at some points this year to do their commentary tracks. It's likely that the Serena will become a 2-volume thing, so that gives me something else to do down the road. And hopefully I can do a 2-volume thing with Sue Nero as well. And then I have some planned for some specific company lines, some really obscure companies, like a best of this company and such, and working on what I'm going to do with the packaging, because I want my packaging to be nice. I have kind of an aesthetic that I'm going for. If you haven't figured it out, that kind of hot pink color is like the official color of Ultra Flash Archives. I mean, I'm trying to create a brand here as well as an aesthetic. So I want people to, hopefully they can look at something and say, "Oh, this came from Ultra Flash Archives." I can tell right away. The collectability of them is also something that I'm conscious of because I'm a collector myself and I enjoy those things. So I try to include all of that in there as well. Like, for example, we did a 50 signature editions of the Leslie Winston Collection that came with a special signature card that she signed. It had a drink coaster with Leslie's face on it. It also had a actual peep show token. So those are the the things that, to provide extras for the collector market as well. So there'll be things like signature cards in the Serena and Suniro and Ronda collections and things of that nature in there as well. I have an endless amount of film that I can cut up and include to give away. Those just come from damaged films that I have. So if I have hundreds and hundreds of these things, instead of just chucking them in the trash, I want to use them for something that's fun and helps add to the collectability. And, they come in a paper bag. Like it's like you left the porno shop and you don't want anybody to know. So just little touches like that, I think are a lot of the things that are going to and already set me apart from what everybody else is doing. I mean, there's a condom inside. Have you ever bought a Blu-ray that had a condom inside? We're pro-sex, pro-safe sex. Get out there and get it on. So, and here's something to help you. That's what it's all about,
Mark, where's the best place for people to pick up Wildheart or any of your other projects?
You can visit ultraflesharchives.com. That will take you to the shop. There's hundreds of original adult posters from the period. They're not reproductions. Most of them have never been circulated, so they're in amazing quality that you're, not really going to find in other places. There's magazines, some videos, and other things. I am going to wind down the store in terms of other items. That was primarily just something to keep me going while I was getting this release ready. So I won't be focusing so much on acquiring things to make available in the store in the future. I'm just going to be focusing strictly on my own releases. When you go to ultraflesharchives.com as well, we have a online magazine. There's 4 issues on there. It's free and downloadable. I'm working on a 5th. Again, that's going to not wind down completely, but you won't see as many going forward as I was doing last year because I'm focusing on those releases as well as Gloria Leonard's biography. So I have quite a full plate of things to do as well as live a normal life like every other human being. So there's a lot going on here, and I have no idea how I'm going to do it, but I do it, and regardless of how long it takes me, like it took me 30 years to write a Rotary and More book, I keep at it, and it comes when it's ready.
That's what I admire about you, Mark. You have that focus, and I just think that's a wonderful thing. You put out such good stuff, and you know your shit.
Thank you. I try, so that's where I'm at.
Well, Leslie, Mark, thank you so much for your time this morning. I really appreciate this, especially for getting up crack of dawn, as far as I'm concerned, on a Saturday. Horrible. So thank you so much for your sacrifice.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mike. We appreciate it.